come down with him when you're
Yes.
the slide? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. And I'm rolling.
My name's Isabel Alkoff. I will be interviewing Mr. Jochanan Taytelbaum. The date is 11/29/23, and we are in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania.
And just hold the slide.
Thing behind you. It was shaking.
Oh.
Yeah.
Taytelbaum, can I have you turn your knees towards Isabel? There you go. Not even that much. Right there. Perfect.
Okay.
And Isabel, would you mind doing me one favor?
Yes.
Just being picky. Isabel, we are rolling.
Good morning, and thank you for having an interview with the USC Shoah Foundation. Can you give your full first name and last name
Jochanan Taytelbaum,
and your date of birth
September 28, 1931.
and your place of birth, please?
Veere, you write that V-E-E-R-E,
And what country was that in?
in the Netherlands.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the home that you grew up in?
Well, it was a two-story house, and attached to it was the place where my father saw patients and also had his mini pharmacy.
Okay. Can you describe the rest of the house, please? How many bedrooms, if you know?
Well, there were, there was my bedroom upstairs, and I think that my parents' was one floor lower.
Did anybody else live in the house?
Well, my sister, who was born in 1935,
Okay. And her name?
Miriam.
And your parents' names?
Maurits, but most people call him Max. That's what he is called after too. Maurits, but we call him Max. Or Max even,
Yes.
for an American.
Right. Right. And your sister's name? What was your sister's name?
Miriam.
Miriam. And your mother's name?
Else was the common name, but her complete name is Elzina
Okay. What was her maiden name?
de Groot.
Okay. And you lived in this house for how long?
Well, since I was born, and in 1940 in May we left.
Okay. Now, did you go to school?
Yes,
And where did you go to school?
in Veere.
Do you remember the name of the school?
No, but it was a small school. It was what you call neutral, not a Catholic or a Protestant
public
school.
school?
Public school.
Okay. Did you go out with friends? Did you invite them to your house? Did you go to friends' houses?
Well, of course, I was when we left in 1940, I wasn't even 9 yet, because war started in May and I became 9 in September.
Okay.
I had one main friend who lived across the street.
What was his name?
Hank.
Hank. And he was Jewish?
No, he was not.
Yeah. Was interrupting everything.
Okay, we're rolling again.
Okay. All right. Your father had a medical practice in the house. What do you remember about his practice there?
Well, it was adjacent to the house, but it had a few steps you could step into the house.
Okay, and did he see his patients in that?
He would see patients. He had a car, a Chevrolet, because if he had to go to a sick person on a farm or so. And I guess that's the life of a doctor. He was the only doctor in the area.
Was there anybody working for him in the office? Or did he have
No.
any? No. Okay. Did you ever go into the office, or were you not allowed to go?
I've been there. I've been there, but not when there was a patient.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And what happened when you got sick? Who took care of you when you got sick?
I don't remember having been sick any time
Very fortunate. Good.
at that time.
Yeah. Okay. So you were in the public school. Were you a good student?
Well, that's just where you started reading the letters, first grade,
Mm-hmm.
second grade, and I was in third grade when we left.
Okay. Did you do any Hebrew school or attend a synagogue?
Well, when the weather was good in summertime or maybe in spring, my parents used to walk to Middelburg, which is the capital of that peninsula, which is called Walcheren. There was a lot of seawater and all that, but you had also roads that go. There was no synagogue because, I had an uncle and an aunt who also lived in Veere. They lived, a little further away, overlooking the canal where boats were laying.
Can you tell me their names? Your aunt and uncle?
Yeah. Well, everybody called him Boy.
Mm-hmm.
But his name was Jacob Machiel.
And your aunt's name? Do you remember her name?
Taytelbaum, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And her name was Blanche. Well, we called it Blanche. Blanche. And her last name, a maiden name, I should say, was Levi.
Good. Okay. Did they have any children?
They had no children.
Okay. Did you have any other family living nearby?
No.
Okay. So, and did everyone speak Dutch at home?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And no other languages were spoken in the house? All right.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And did you have relatives from other cities visiting sometimes?
Yeah, well, an aunt or whatever, or my grandmother, I remember, came one time.
And where was she from?
Amsterdam.
Okay. Do you remember her name?
Miriam Clara de Groot, but her last name was Monnikendam. Her maiden name, last name.
Okay. And would she come often when she came from Amsterdam? Did she stay in your house? How?
Yeah, but it was rare that she came. It's quite a distance, and she had difficulty with the leg,
Mm-hmm.
and she had difficulty hearing, so that was rare.
Okay. So at 9 years old, had you experienced any anti-Semitic incidents in your life before that?
No.
Do you think your parents experienced anti-Semitism?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. And tell us how things changed.
Beg pardon?
Tell me how things changed after the Nazis came.
We had left. My father, Holland is next in the east is Germany. And you read every day what goes on. like when they broke glass,
Kristallnacht.
the windows of Jewish stores were smitten, and the things, they all came in the newspaper, and you knew what was going on. And in 1938, he took out a passport for the family.
He, meaning?
My father.
Thank you.
And I have an old passport from the family. In those days, it was not per individual person, but you see my parents and my sister and I on that photograph.
Okay, so your father took a passport, and then what
In
happened?
1938, no, he just had it.
Mhm.
But it was already, in case we would ever have to leave or whatever. That was well foreseen.
Mhm. Okay.
And when the war broke out, or I should say, when the Germans invaded Holland on the 10th of May in 1940, my father wanted to leave, but the mayor said, "You cannot leave. You are the only doctor in north of Walcheren." And certainly in a war situation, we need a doctor. So he wasn't allowed to leave, and the police guy that we had took the keys from his car. But a few days later, the Germans came very near to Veere, and there was a big during the night, a bombardment of the train station in Middelburg. Veere had no train; it was too small for that. But anyway, when the bombardment in Middelburg had been pretty heavy. I'll get to that in a little while. Anyway, the mayor did not want Veere to be bombarded also, and stepped on the top of the how do you call that when you have where the government of a little town is
City Hall.
City Hall, of course, and they had not even recordings or loudspeakers or whatever. He just tried to, people who were gathered around, because it had been noticed that he would speak. He said that Veere will not fight the Germans. We consider ourselves neutral or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And my father said, "Can I now leave?" And that was another story. And the mayor made an observation that, you see, when things get bad, people flee or whatever. He didn't say it so nicely, but more or less it came to that. And then my father went home. We got in the car. Nothing had been prepared, like suitcases with clothing or whatever, and we left with only the clothes on our backs. He wanted to go south. Belgium is just below Holland, and below Belgium is France. All right. So in order to get, there is an obstacle, because you had a passage when we came to Middelburg. Oh, let me say, Middelburg. There was glass on the streets or whatever from windows that had blown out from the bombing, and the train station was on fire. I still remember the orange light from fire that came from windows over there. It was on the other side of the canal. Anyway, there was full of glass on the street, on the road where my father had to drive, and we drove through it. And no flat tire. And my parents, who were very religious, Orthodox, I'm not Orthodox, more liberal. Anyhow, said, you see, God is taking care of us, something to that extent. And we drove along and we went to the port city of Vlissingen. Flushing in New York is named after it. Anyway, there was a ferry to go across the water to get into, still a little bit of Dutch land, and then came Belgium. And we were waiting for the ferry to get the ferry to cross it with the car on it, whatever. They had a regular ferry service. Anyway, we were waiting and we were hiding somewhere where we could a little bit. If you take a ball or a grapefruit and you cut it in half, you would get something, and it had one opening, and they had a little thing, maybe they had chocolates there. And funny enough, that's where the first time I saw also Wrigley's PK. I know now the expression. Chewing gum. The soldiers had left, they had fled the place. Anyway, we wait for the ferry to come, and after so many hours, the ferry did come. And my father walked over and spoke to an officer and said, we'd like also to go over the water. And the officer said, no, that cannot be done. We are here. There's only French troops that are retreating. Just as the English also did at one point from Belgium. It was a disaster. Some of them drowned when they went to the ships to collect them. But anyway, that's not. My father said, "Look, I'm a doctor, and in time of war, I can be useful." So the officer went to the captain, and came back and said, "Okay, you can come." And we got on the ship, on the ferry, and we went to the other way. Now, and over there where the ferry went, there was a little town called Breskens. And that day was a Friday, and Shabbat is coming up. And somehow whether it was a house or I don't know what other, but people made a room available. We could sleep that night. In the meantime, the Germans, of course, had come further down. And my father said, "Come on, else we have to leave." She said, "What? Driving on Shabbat? Cannot be." And it was the only time I ever saw my parents have an argument. And my father used the Jewish words of Pirkei Avot, which means the the saving of a life is more important than Jewish Orthodox laws. So we went into the car, and my mother sat there with a sourpuss face and didn't speak a word. And Miriam and I were in the back. And we drove in Belgium quite a bit. And at one point, so that's going south, somebody was standing by the road and said, could he get a lift in the car? And my father said, well, you're welcome, but you know, I have very little gasoline in the car, and I don't know how far I will get before I see a pump. And the guy said, well, if that's the situation, you know what, I'll wait for somebody else. And we drove on, and there was another guy asking for a lift. And my father told him what had proceeded before, and so and so and so. And he said to my father, don't you worry, I'll take care of it. And sure enough, we came to a gas station, and we want to say, no, we have orders, we may only give gasoline to military transportation. The other guy steps out and opens his jacket or his coat, whatever it was, and he said, British counterintelligence, fill the tank. And it happened. Yeah, that's a thing that always, to this day, you know. And what did my parents say in the car? Right.
Exactly.
So anyway, we drove through Belgium, and the Germans were not far behind. And I could hear, I still remember, well, not very strong, but still cannon being fired in the back of where we were. So, and then we entered France. Thank God we had a passport. And my father also, what he had in his jacket was his certificate from the university that he was a doctor. Yeah. So we drove to Paris, quite a distance from there. And my father went to the embassy, the Dutch embassy there, and spoke to them about whatever. Said, where am I going to stay? Where can I go? Or what? You must have probably more refugees. And he said, well, we have the Juliana. That was the name of the daughter of Queen Wilhelmina. Juliana eventually became queen. And then she had a daughter called Beatrix. And Beatrix has a son who is now the king in Holland. Anyway, we have the Juliana house. What happened? Certain countries had, how shall I call it? There were buildings with many rooms, studies from people who came to study in France at the Sorbonne or whatever. And they had then one place where all those students of the same country could get together and talk the language and feel more at home. And this Juliana, it's still standing. It was very modern. It had been built in the 1930s, Bauhaus time. and we stayed there for a while, and met a friend there. We became friends who also were from Holland, but from a different city. They came from Maastricht, which is all the way at the south of Holland. Anyway, we even saw some German aircraft flying over, but they did not at that time bombard Paris because it was considered one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. But we counted them a little bit, another sport. Anyway, but there came a time that they also came into France and came closer. The French had made them, between them, part where they have a frontier with Germany, the Maginot Line. If you've ever heard of it. Anyway, with all the cannon aimed in the direction of Germany. What they didn't do, Belgium was on the other side. The Maginot Line didn't go all the way till the sea, but only the German part. So what did the Germans do? They went around it and came into France. Anyway, and then we got orders that all these refugees, we have to go to the south of France or whatever. And we went with the car. Others went by bus or by train, that I do not know. And we went to a place where they had standing a left alone part to see it. They called it a castle. It wasn't really quite, it was in Arabic style made. They had, but it looked on it, but it wasn't furnished, it had been left alone. And we went there, and people had, as they came in more and more, slept on the floor.
Where
on
was
straw.
this located? I'm sorry. Where was this located?
It was located not far from a little town called Confolens. We slept on straw, but and they had the embassy had appointed somebody as a speaker for all these people or whatever, for all of us.
The Dutch embassy.
Yeah, he had appointed him. He was an artist, a painter, and so he had lived in Paris and all that, took lessons maybe in painting and others, but they were known to the embassy. He was the man to speak to. All right. Anyway, after time, he was living that place there, part to see that I just named, was part of a big piece of land owned by a big, what you call a landowner, and he had a farm family who worked the land. They had cows, they had sheep, and they had vegetation, all that. They were, how you call, sharecroppers would be the name maybe.
Very good.
And yeah, and since they knew him, they had contact, and he went, and that landowner he had been what I was told, an officer before. He was already at a later age retired, and he mainly passed his time in Lyon and in Paris. And, that place was empty, and Kicker there moved in there, that artist. And since my father was the only doctor or whatever, he got a little privilege, and we were allowed to live there too. We got out and we were able to sleep in beds.
Do you know approximately when you arrived there? Like how long had you since you left your house?
The house was left, I think it was the 17th of May. And then we were for a while in Paris. It wasn't quite half a year, but maybe several months. I couldn't remember my age.
Yes.
I was only 9.
So you got to live in this
house
house
over there, yeah. And yeah, my father, after a while, was able to leave that. He went to this place called Confola, went to the hospital, went to talk, took out his medical thing, told his story, and they could use another doctor there because of military situations. Now, all that Confola, for example, was General Pétain, who ruled in France there, made a deal with the Germans, how you call that, armistice. Armistice, I call, right? And it stopped, and that was about 20 kilometers above where we were in Confola. And we managed to get there. And my father got it because he got a job at the hospital, and we lived there. And I went to school there. They put me in a French school. They didn't speak a word of French. So when the teacher gave a dictée, she spoke, and you have to write it. I wrote it like I heard it in a Dutch way. Anyway, we stayed there for quite a while. My parents even organized. There were some other Jewish refugees, more from Eastern Europe, and they organized for a minyan. We're getting together on Shabbat, and we in the top floor of the house where we were, because you had to go stairs and there were no elevators. They had services on Friday night. Anyway, came a time towards the end of 1942 that the Germans saw how the Allies were moving up in North Africa, and they were below this Vichy France. It was Italy. And the Germans didn't have, I was told, much confidence that the Italians would also be able to stop the Germans who had been fighting there in North Africa. And the Germans then decided that they were going to go further south. No more Vichy France. Anyway, it was arranged through foreign diplomatic people. Like, for example, I know one was the consul from Sweden who could give that they could travel into Spain or whatever. Affidavit. Anyhow, then we took the bus from Confola to Limoges.
What
They
happened to your car?
The car had to be left alone was abandoned in Conflans. So we all went in a bus to Limoges at the time. They were known for porcelain and very little things that little kids would play with, tables, chairs, or whatever. Anyhow, and then from Toulouse we went by train from Limoges to Toulouse, which was further down. Later became famous because that's where the European jet planes were made for, like here you have, you know what I mean. But okay, and then we went through the Pyrenees mountain range, and they came on board from Spain to inspect passports and all those things. And we went to Madrid, and there we got out, and all these people were placed in small little hotels or whatever. And we were waiting for a passenger ship that was coming across from the ocean. But I should say before that when war broke out, Queen Wilhelmina and her ministers flew to London, and they had a good relation with the British monarchy and the ministers. You know what I mean? All that, and they were talking, and they could be shipped from Spain. And we had all the Dutch had hoped to go to Curacao because that was Dutch. All these islands, you know, Curacao, Aruba, and Bonaire, and some more where St. Martin is near St. Thomas, but that's not too important. Anyhow, we were waiting. But when the governor from Curacao heard that there were coming many Dutch fugitives, and among them there were also, by the way, we found that out in Spain, some of the people from the Dutch underground had managed by night or whatever, on foot or whatever, to get out of Holland and went south. And they were also there in the group that went. And but when the governor of Curacao heard that so many Dutch and many Jews among them, whatever, were coming, he said he sent a telegram to London. Listen, we can't handle this. We either have to have here some Americans, soldiers, army and navy, to protect us because of the refinery, which the Germans tried to blow up by the means of submarines that would use torpedoes. And they heard that in England they got a message from the governor. There's a problem. And the ministers went to speak to the British. And the British said, you know something? On Jamaica, we built a camp in the good sense of the word. What had happened when war broke out with France and Italy or whatever? Gibraltar was English, and really, to get into the Mediterranean, you passed Gibraltar. It's just enough for 2 ships to be able to pass in there. And they said, you know, many of the Gibraltarians didn't want to come to Jamaica. Some said, I'll go to France, I go to Morocco, or I go to Libya, whatever, you know what I mean? Not too far away. So what had happened is they had excess space there. And they said, you know, let the ship continue to Jamaica, and then they can go over there. The ship, but there was a passenger ship, and it was coming back from the Americas, and we had to all wait for it. And then we all went when the ship arrived to the port city of Vigo, which is in Spain, but just above Portugal. And the ship was the Marqués de Comillas, or Milias, if you want to. And they had 3 huge Spanish flags painted on the sides of the ship. One towards the front, one in the middle, and one towards the stern. And because they didn't want to be mistaken by the Germans for it being English or whatever, and they would torpedo it. Because France with Franco and Germany were a little bit good friends. Anyway, and one time we all looked, there was a British submarine, and it came and was underwater, but had big lights come up. They were checking, but they wanted to make sure that those 3 flags were not fake. And, you know, and but the captain, whatever, we were all kids by then, but we were not asked, but some people spoke to the captain, and the British were understood, and we continued on. We continued on, and we went to Trinidad. The ship had to stop because for refueling after a long transatlantic. Anyway, but we were not allowed. The ship was not allowed to moor at the quay, or quay, how do you call it?
Harbor.
The harbor, yeah. Well, we had to anchor down in a bay. The city was at the bay, because they were thought, you know, that some people might jump the ship, and they would still have them there. They wanted everybody to stay on the ship. All right. And then came through the news about Jamaica, and we left and we went there. And it was all made of wood. You had running water, and there were toilets even, and all that, you know. And everybody got a little ID booklet in light blue, who he was or whatever, and you could leave the place from 7 in the morning till about 7 at night, and go out, go to Kingston or go elsewhere. And
Was it gated? Everything gated? Was it enclosed? How did they know you were leaving? Was there a guard?
no, they had gates, and you showed them that you had your thing and where you were going. You said, okay, you can go. Okay. And that way they put me in a it was a Catholic school outside somewhere. What was the name again? I'll remember it later. Baton or something. A little village. First, we had to walk quite a deal to get to the gate, and then you had to. There were women sitting by the road selling fruit or bananas and whatever.
What was
Yeah.
your house like there? What did you live in an apartment or a house? Or?
No, it was just a bedroom for my parents, a bedroom for my sister and I, and it even had a balcony where you could sit one time.
Was your father working there?
Well, that's coming up.
And how did you get food? Was there like a market, an open air market that you
Where?
could shop in Jamaica? And where did you get food from?
No. In the camp they had the big kitchens with personnel and whatever.
Like a cafeteria type thing?
Yeah, and there was for kosher a small one and a big one for non-kosher. After since you could get out, and he spoke to the hospital there in Jamaica, and they were short of doctors, and they took him in as a doctor, and we moved out of the camp and went to live in Kingston. Was a house where the lady rented out rooms, and we lived there. It was in Duke Street, and more or less diagonally across from where we were, there was a Jewish synagogue, Reform. But my parents, they would have no part of it. Because Reform, that was... So they had first put me, as I told you, in a French school. Je parle français encore, hein?
Right.
And then they put me in an English school. And the same thing happened, you know what I mean? Swim or drown. So you learn to swim. And I learned English. It was the Wilbur School. I had quite a walk to get there. And so we learned a little bit. And then happened the following. KLM Airlines, you've heard of. They had a West Indian division. And they had in that division in Curacao, there were very new planes, 2 engines, all metal, shining metal. I don't quite at this moment can recall the name, the brand of it, Troupial or not, I don't remember, but the name. Anyway, I had told you that among our group we had some that had fled from the underground or whatever, and they were very much annoyed that they are Dutch and Curacao is Dutch, and what right do they have to refuse us? So one day they got on board of a plane. How do you call it when you go without anybody knowing? Not the pilots, not nobody. Nobody knows you're there. They were, let's say, in the baggage compartment. 2 or 3. They said, nothing. And they went, and the plane flew back to Curacao because Curacao, they connected the islands. West Indian division of KLM. And when it reached Curacao, they got out, and of course there was quite a scene going on there. I can describe it. I wasn't there, but anyhow. And the result was that they had to come in all the Dutch people to Curacao. And then they sent out some people on another flight, probably heads of divisions, be it from the prison, be it from whatever, you know what I mean, whatever division. And my father was a doctor, the only one there. And of course, we were welcome to Curacao. Others also went, yeah, I don't know what, some were from the diamond industry, assorted. And my father, after a while, I told you already that he was in Jamaica, right? That, yeah. But others were of military age, had to go to Canada, yeah, where the Prince Bernhard Brigade was being formed. And they partook in the invasion of 1945. You know, the big invasion from America. You had the Prince Bernhard. Prince Bernhard was German, I would say, Lippe Biesterfeld, Bernhard von Biesterfeld. He was from nobility, but low level, not a high degree, like, you know, count or whatever, but whatever. And he had even be a pilot in an Air Force pilot from the Germans. And he married Juliana. And yeah, and we went to Curacao because they needed doctors there too. My
How
father.
did you get from Kingston to Curacao?
We also flew
Okay.
in that same type of plane that they had.
The KLM.
But you know what they had done? You couldn't see out the window because they had the windows of the plane had been blackened because the British were afraid that the spies would come and would see where their fortresses were, where the cannon were, whatever. Interesting. And so we landed in Curacao.
Do you know what the date was approximately?
The date? No,
How
I can't.
old were you?
I must have been 11 or something by then.
Okay. And was it during the school year? Was it during the school year that you arrived?
The school year when I went to put in Curacao was at first a disaster because I had irregular schoolings and whatever. And they said, well, he is so old, so he belongs in this class. In the meantime, since my education in those schools were bits and pieces and this and that, the first time that I got a report card, it was a disaster. In the second part of the year, it was better. And for the third, before the big vacation, it was even better than that, I had learned. And over there already they learn English starting in the fifth grade, if I remember correctly. And in the 6th year, they added English to it. And in the 7th year, you could choose between Spanish and German. That's how that school worked.
Was
so
it a
it was
public school or a,
public. There were Catholic schools also, and even a Protestant one. Yeah.
do you remember the address? The address of your home?
Of my
When you arrived in Curacao, did you live in a house or apartment, or describe where you lived?
when we lived in Curacao, yeah, we had to find a house. Yeah, I know. And it was on Scharlo, a certain part of the city. And from there, I had to walk to school. And because my father needed a car, it was a pretty good business. You had to go in the morning because school started, let's say, at 9 o'clock, about. And then there was a break for lunch, and you had to walk, not with brunches like they have here in the States. You had to go home to eat and go back again at 2 o'clock and walk in the sun. Yeah. The sun is the cause of all this. I've had a lot of treatment later as an adult. You know what I mean? That were precancerous.
Yeah.
But that's been taken care of. But yeah, I can't complain. I even have brown hair, not white.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you stayed in Curacao and finished school? For how many years were you attending public school?
I entered at sixth. Then it went till 10. But then, yeah, you had a change when you reached the 9th grade or the 10th grade. Do you want to go into an academic?
A baccalaureate program.
Yeah. Or go into a
trade,
merchant, whatever. Well, I took at first the merchant and a little bit of no, not only German. You could also, yeah. I took extra French, and yeah, and that's how it went. But my parents, they had work and all that, but after Israel's birth, which was in 1948, in 1949, my father had a big leave from his job because they had an old system in Holland. Let's say doctors, engineers, or other type of specialties. They went out to Curacao to work for so many years, and then you could get a big vacation to see your relatives back left in Holland. And so, but we were allowed to spend several months. We went to Israel because my father wanted to work there as a doctor, because he had always been a Zionist. But it was just after the war, and Israel was full of doctors. They had already left in the 30s when it went bad with Hitler and all that, and they had so many, and even Kupat Cholim, if you know that okay, had a lot of doctors, and so they couldn't place him, and to his dismay and chagrin and whatever you want to call it, he had to go back to Curacao. And yeah, and they had already sort of given up on him or whatever, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we have no place, but you can get a place in Aruba." So we went to Aruba, which is a sister island. yeah. And I had passed school.
Did you also go with your parents to
to-
Israel
yeah.
and then to Aruba?
No, not to Aruba. I'll tell you why. When we lived in Curacao, we had there was a Club Union, which a club union club. It was from mainly East European Jews who had come already in the late 1920s and in the 1930s, and then the rabbi who we had, Rabbi Cardozo, he ordered for kids a Jewish club from those parents, and it was Club Maccabi. And you met other Jewish, and I met the one who would become my wife,
And her name, please?
Leah Groisman. Leah, she was about 6 weeks, 6 months younger than I am, or was at that time. Anyway, and she was in school, and she had a sister, Rachel, younger than she was. My wife died here. She passed away in 2004 from cancer. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about Rachel or Leah?
Rachel,
Your wife, yeah.
my wife, yeah, well, she spoke Dutch. We had Dutch in school, and she spoke Spanish, and she spoke English, and also learned French. And when we went to Israel, my family, she decided that she was going to take Hebrew lessons from somebody in order to well, get to meet me over there. So she took for a while English lab, but when we came back, that sort of stopped. And yeah, after when she graduated from high school, she went for a year. I think it was 1 year, not two, to an English school in Florida, and came back after 1 or 2 years. Now my father-in-law, who became my father-in-law, he had a business, and he had in there a man working also who was a refugee, but was a relative from my grandmother's, from my mother-in-law's side. But that man, that didn't work out well. Now, Leah and I, we knew already when we were 15 that we were going to get married. We just anyway. So my father-in-law didn't get around with this fellow, and this fellow quit and went to look for a job, which he got in Aruba. Yeah, by that time I was about 17 or so. And he said, you know what, since you're going to marry Leah in due time, why don't you come in the store to work? And that's how that went. And we were still quite a long time not married. We were too young for that. Yeah, and I learned a lot over there. It was all new to me. But he had alte Schmattes, if you know. And in the meantime, the tourist industry in Curacao had grown. Ships came, stayed for a day. People went on shore, did shopping. Curacao had a reputation of being almost duty-free. So they asked for things and asked for things and asked for things. And finally, I said, Pa, we should change. We've tried all sorts of things. At one time, besides the spates, cheap dungarees and whatever you want to name it. We started out with jeans. Wrangler was first. And I had told him because we had people from the ships that came, the crew, and asked for this or that. Do you have jeans? Yes, we have. No, not these. We want Levi, Lee.
Levi's also. Levi's also, yeah.
Yeah, Levi's. Yeah, I know, but no. So I told him, look, when you next go on the ship, do you go to New York to do buying for the store? Make sure you buy Lee Riders, I think was the name. Well, anyway, the jeans began to come, but what are they? They're Wrangler. I didn't say Wrangler, I said Lee. No, those are too expensive. You have to sell them at 9 guilders a piece. That's $5. And the Lee Riders could sell for $3.50. Imagine how much money can you make. Anyway, I kept pushing that we should go in other lines and all that business. And slowly we did. And I remember on my first trip to Europe for shopping, we had to learn our way around. Leah went with me, of course. And there had been, my father sold neckties that were sold also to the police or whatever. They were maybe $1 or $2 a piece. I remember the name, Melbrook. Doesn't mean anything to you. No. Anyway, so these tourists come in the stores. You see, you have ties? Yes, we have ties. No. I want something good. Do you have Pierre Cardin? No, we don't. And I heard that more often, whatever. And when we went to France, to Paris, we went to Pierre Cardin. And sure enough, I placed an order there. After so much time, the ties come in, and, we have to price them. And they were maybe $15 a piece or something. Bush, is de machine geworden? Did you go crazy? Selling ties for 25 guilders or dollars, I don't remember. But when a tourist walks in, oh, you have Pierre Cardin ties. Let me see. Take out from the showcase a few ties and put them on. No. Let me see more. Let me see more. Okay, I'll take this one, that one, this one, that one, this one, that one. My father stood at a distance with his mouth open. And the guy had bought a dozen. And then came more and more. We had a lot of merchandise from Switzerland, articles from Holland, articles from, we sold Burberry from England in raincoats and jackets and you name it. And
So, as part of your business, you were the buyer for the business, so to speak.
also,
So you got to travel all over Europe to.
well, yeah, even we went in, well, I'll get to the biggie. We did more and more of that and less of the other. And the store, even the name was not appropriate. It had been called the Marine Store. Why? Because he got people from ships who bought dungarees or whatever. I mean, we had to give it a new name, and we called it Cosmopolitan. Anyway, and one of the things that we also took in was Bali shoes from Switzerland. I had been told that they were very expensive in America, but we should be able. So I sent, tell my father-in-law, he likes to go to do the shopping. That way he got out a little with his wife. But he didn't, he brought shoes back. I said, that's not what we want. That's not what I told you. It had to be Bali shoes. That he ordered from the States. The States, they were being sold from a place up in New York State where they had a huge, how do you call it, inventory. And stores would just ship. Like, for example, a guy was a size 8 or a 9 or whatever. And said, well, we don't have that size, but we can order it for you. And in 2-3 days, it will be here. So they never really had big stocks of shoes, those stores. But they and I went to Switzerland, and we went to Bali, and we placed an order for men's and women's. At the beginning, of course, modest. And that business of Bali shoes grew and grew and grew tremendously in our store. We had at that time, I should have told you, he had first been in an old colonial house. It was the store. And after a couple of years, we built a 4-story building with elevator. The first store with an elevator in the island. Anyway, it went so big that one floor that had been with various clothing and also Bali became entirely a Bali floor. With equipment and this and that, and it got very well. And when I went back, when I saw how much we could sell in Curacao, I spoke to them when I was there in Switzerland. There's an island, Aruba. They should also do well. I can sell shoes there, but we cannot do it ourselves. We have to do it with a trusty firm. And I said, okay, you can sell there from your sample range, or we send you samples. And it grew, and it grew, and it grew. And it went from one island to the next, to the next, the next. Sold in Puerto Rico, sold in St. Thomas, sold in, you name it, all sorts of things. And it became very big. And yeah, that was our claim to fame.
Can you please tell me, in the meantime, where your parents were?
My parents, they tried again to go to Israel. When after his time in Aruba was, that I told you, after so many years you can go, and they went to Israel again to try. And this time he had a different situation. That was quite a few years later. And found a Jew. We lived first in Tel Aviv in a place.
Your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I had gone with them. I told you, Leah had even started Hebrew lessons. And yeah, after a time, he moved, and he went to live in Kiryat Bialik, which is a little town just north of Haifa. And there they had Kupat Cholim, and he worked in one of those. Yeah. And in the meantime, of course, with all these changes, we were married. Leah and I were married, of course. And we went with one time to visit them over there, and we had 2 children, Max and his sister. And then, yeah, he worked, but I had to go back after a few weeks or whatever. I couldn't stay long. My father-in-law couldn't handle it enough. But I told him, look, it doesn't pay for you to go back now, stay longer. And we had the 2 little kids with us. They stayed there with her. And my father had, in order to get to the Kupat Cholim where he worked, he had a little car. It was a Hillman from England. I don't know if I had never heard of that name before. But it was with shifts. And we had a car already with
Automatic.
Or it was, 1 in 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah, but I can't drive a car with 5 shifts or whatever. I said, we'll try it together. I'll teach you. She had tears in her eyes that she had to stay there or whatever. And I let her do it. And sure enough, so she stayed. And she took my father to his office, and she could take the kids to playgrounds and whatever. I told her, what you can do is that you'll lock yourself up in this apartment. You know what I mean? You can't go anywhere. You can't move. And that was a success till she came back with them. And then after that, we had 1 more daughter.
Can you, at this time, tell me your 3 children's names?
Yeah. There's Maurits. In Holland, we had always the habit of naming after your father. So in other words, to the baby's grandfather, as you considered him to be a good how shall I express
Protection,
that?
like a protector.
Protect, well, yeah, you know, you honor your father by doing that.
Mhm.
So he is also called Maurits, but we call him all Max. My father was also named Max in common use. And then we have, and then we have Rosalind, who was called after my mother-in-law's mother. And then we have Debbie, which we just take. God, can you believe suddenly it's a blank? I'm
sure it'll come back to you.
Yeah, it'll come back to me.
Yes.
Anyhow,
So the three children were they all born in Curacao or
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
all were born in Curacao.
Okay. And do you want to tell me about grandchildren while we're on the subject?
Yes. Well, we have grandchildren. We have great-grandchildren. The children were born in Curacao. Rosalind married. Well, she studied in the States. After the schools there, we sent kids all to study in the States. They all went to college, and we all prayed for it. No, not from the government or whatever, the full thing.
Did your
Yeah.
children all speak Dutch?
Yep.
And did they learn English at school?
Yes.
Okay, so they could attend university without a problem.
Yeah. Max went. Yeah, at one time he was also. We showed him where he could go in the States, and where he could go in Holland, and where he could go in Israel, because the grandfather's parents were living there. And having been infected with, how do you call it? When you are, come on, the name doesn't word come, a Zionist.
Mhm.
So he picked the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. But first he had the whole summer vacation to take Hebrew, to learn to speak, because the professors teach in Hebrew. Oh, he did. But boy, what the professors spoke was still a lot higher than what the students take, or whatever. And but then he was the youngest, more or less, in the class, 17. And yeah, the Israelis, they had all gone at 18 in the army, and they had no problem with the language. So what happened? But they had trouble with the English, because the books were in English. So they helped Max with Hebrew, and he helped them with English.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked.
Mm-hmm.
It worked very well. Yeah.
Okay. How long did your parents stay in Israel, and when did they pass?
Yeah, they're buried in Har HaManuchot. As you enter Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, the first thing is a huge cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
Right with the wall up where the road
Outside
is.
the walls.
And they're buried there. Yeah.
And you stayed in Curacao for how long?
How I still, they and I and the kids, we all came. It was January 1, 1987. Why did I wait till 1? I didn't want to go sometime in December, and then maybe I get in trouble with the IRS. I have to pay taxes or whatever. So we came on the 1st of January.
And with all three kids, with all three of your children, or were they already grown?
Oh, sure, yeah, sure, yeah.
All right. And where did you settle? Where did you
First,
move to when you came to America?
On Old York, not Old York, Huntingdon Pike, diagonally across from Holy Redeemer Hospital is Tall Trees, is a building.
So the Philadelphia area. You
Yeah.
came to Philadelphia.
Yeah, in the Philadelphia.
Okay. And tell me, looking back, would you have done anything differently?
No.
Okay. And did you ever ask your father why you didn't go back to Holland after the war? Was that an option?
All the relatives who were in Holland perished, all murdered by the Germans.
Can you recall any of their names for me?
Oh, my mother had 6. Sarah was the oldest. She had a little bit of a defect because of birth. They must have done, when they have to pull out, they grab you. Forceps,
yes.
but they pinched here, it seems. And there was Philip, and there was Wolf, and there was Tante Esther, and there was, Bernard the youngest. So it goes. You had all these.
So all of them were killed?
All of them were, yeah.
Okay. And on your father's side?
My father's side, his brother, his elder brother. He had 2 brothers, one elder and one younger.
And they were killed also during the war?
That's another story. My elder uncle was also from Suriname, where he was born.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife was also from Suriname.
Mm-hmm.
But they came to Holland, and he did business, but unclear in what. But he did very well. And he also lived in Veer at a certain time. At a certain time, the Germans ordered that all Jews who live in Holland must move to Amsterdam. We want them a little bit together. My father, I skipped something. When war broke out,
Mm-hmm.
in those first days that we were still there, he had taken in a Jewish German young man in his house who had fled Germany, and they got very attached to him. The uncle and aunt became attached to him, and they wanted to flee at the beginning of the occupation, let's say on the 5th day, or the 3rd or the 4th, I don't remember. And yeah, and they would travel. He had no car. They went through Belgium, and then came to the French border. Okay, passports. Yeah, but he's a German. He can't come in. There's the enemy. You know what I mean? And they were so fond of him that they said, if he can't go, we don't go either. So all three went back to Holland. Yeah, and when came 1942, 1943, well, already Jews went to Auschwitz, to Sobibor, mainly, very big. You had the trouble, and that so my uncle, he knew that it would probably be bad for him, but he stayed. But what did he do? He saw to it one way or another to get his wife Blanche in a hospital. In a hospital. And she stayed there several months. But one time comes, there must have been a doctor or something who said, what is it with this woman who's been lying here for so long? What is it? Let's... well, that went for the end of her stay at the hospital, of course. They got her out, you know what I mean? And that, the result of that is that if you see that he died first, and so many months later, he died, if I remember correctly, in Auschwitz, and she died in Sobibor. That's how it went.
Were you able to track the young man from Germany, the German Jew that?
But he must have been killed anyway.
Okay,
I don't know.
you
But I
didn't-
haven't heard
you
that.
don't have a record. Okay. Do you want to tell me anything else about your experiences? Is there some particular story that stands out or something that we missed?
I think I told you a lot.
Yeah, you did. Okay.
Ooh,
Ooh.
ooh.
So, okay.
I broke all the records.
I want to ask you one more question. How are you affected by the war? This is 2023, and there's a war going on in Israel. Can you tell me how you feel about how you reacted to this war?
Well, there's not much I can do, but you should see how much time I spent on CNN and on I-24.
Okay. Were you feeling threatened in any way? Are you reacting to the anti-Semitic events? How are you feeling? Of course,
it's a terrible thing what's going on with the non-Jews. I just can't understand it. And if you look, for example, there are books that have come out, Jewish scientists in various fields who have won Nobel Prizes over the many years. You'd be surprised. And yet, you know what I mean? Whether it's jealousy or whatever, I don't know.
Anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Dayanam.
Amen. Welcome to join your father after telling his story in great detail. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Max Taytelbaum. What else would you like to know about
I'd
me?
like to know more about your travels with your father.
Oh, sure. Well, it was in 2009 that we decided to take a trip and retrace his escape with his parents from Holland on down. We we started in Holland. I wanted to actually see where his grandparents lived. They were Orthodox, as you may know, and they lived in basic brick housing, apartment type. We went down to Veere, where my dad was born, and where my grandfather was a medical doctor. And then we did ride by car, going first to Breskens in Belgium and just basically stopping there, and then traced down to Paris, where we went to Princess Juliana House of the University of Paris, uh, which was compared to probably what my dad saw at the time, brand new and modern. It looked a little more run down, actually. And then we went down to the Conflans area, and I saw the little mansion where they first stopped. It is now actually, it got renovated to be a sort of people vacation there now. And there was actually a Dutch couple there at the time, and we described to them that my dad had been there during the war. Um, my father always described it as a castle, and because it had this motif at the top, and actually it turned out to be more of a Moroccan-looking structure, uh, and, uh, uh, and he described there the conditions. It was because of my grandfather being a doctor that when that became known to the caretaker of that area, uh, they moved into the actually the more of the estate building that covered those grounds. The owner being in Paris, uh, and uh, uh, and then because my grandfather was a doctor, he got the job at a hospital in Conflans, and we went there and looked there, and he showed me the apartment from a distance, uh, where they lived on the third floor. Told me that his sister took a pretty bad spill and has still a scar for, I was thinking of the Dutch word litteken, uh, scar from it on her head. And he showed me the distance that he had to walk to get milk. My grandmother had decided that this particular farm met her kosher requirements for milk, and my dad had to walk a good mile to this, being 9, 10 years old, with this milk jar, go get the milk and walk back. He showed me where he had to pump the water that they had to bring up, and they didn't have bathrooms, and he showed me the outhouse on the river. Uh, and so we spent most of our time there, and we went to from there to Spain and Madrid, but we skipped the last part going to Vigo. From there, we basically flew back to the U.S. To me, it was a uh, eye-opening experience. My grandfather always seemed to me like, kind of a not very motivated person to, I'll say nebbish kind of person. And what became so clear to me on this trip is that if it wasn't for his decisions to do the pikuach nefesh, to leave on Shabbat regardless when they were in Belgium, to go on to Paris, my dad wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here, and the fact that he had this medical degree that opened all these doors, and that he was able to get on the ferry from Holland over into Belgium. He probably told you about the person from counterintelligence of Britain to get gasoline to get to Paris, and then also getting the conditions where he would be able to work in the hospital in Conflans, and then even when they left Europe and ended up in Camp Gibraltar in Jamaica, again because he was my grandfather, being a medical doctor, got a position in Kingston, and then eventually ended up in Curacao. And so I asked my dad, how come you didn't push me to become a medical doctor, or yourself to be, because it was such a ticket to freedom. And my father had told me that basically that my grandfather always told him that there's a lot of misery that you see, and and of course he also met my mother, and things changed and didn't do it. And so what about me? And because I was so enamored in high school with chemistry and so on, he didn't really push that. And so I followed that route. But I have wondered often about, should I have gone to med school and done differently. But this really sealed that trip in 2009 that we did, and it was truly a moving experience for me.
Thank you. Is there anything that
What
you'd
you
like to
forgot
say?
is Oradour-sur-Glane. Oradour-sur-Glane.
Oh, the location that got destroyed and burned by the Germans because they thought one of their citizens had killed a German officer or something?
Yeah, something like that, from the underground, and they killed up the entire village. The men were taken away and shot, and then the women and children were put in a church
and burned.
and they burned them alive.
And where was the village, please?
Oradour-sur-Glane.
In the south of France?
In France. And yeah,
I can show it to you a little later.
Okay.
but we went there, and it is preserved as is. All destroyed.
All the houses were ruined, blazed, everything.
Do you have a message that you'd like to give your father on film?
Sure. I think that what we're doing here is really important to me and both of my sisters. We felt that it was important to tell this story, while having not been in the, rescued from the camps, but rather be a refugee. Your family on your mother's side, suffered tremendously and all died in the camps.
Yeah.
I think this is just super important to document.
Anything you want to add today?
No, not really.
Thank you both very, very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So
What?
if you could just tell us what this is a photo, you can just look right at the monitor right here. And you can
It's
see
the
right-
passport.
No.
Describe it, please.
She's asking if you could just describe it and who it is for.
Well, this was the passport that my father obtained. That was in 1938. Already he had heard what's going on in Germany, and if you want to flee somewhere at some time, you need a passport. Of course, it is so old. At one time, it couldn't be used anymore, and it was stamped by the consulate like onbruikbaar, which means no longer usable or useful.
Okay, I'm rolling. So if you could just describe this page.
In those days.
This page shows how in those days, in the late 30s, you could have a family passport. And the word in Dutch is onbruikbaar. That means it is no longer usable.
Who's in the picture?
In the picture, yeah, you see my parents, myself, and Miriam, my sister.
Okay, and I'm rolling.
It's not quite horizontal.
Okay, we are rolling.
Yeah, here you see our parents and me with my sister
In Curacao, bro.
in Curacao. I think so. I don't know.
And I'm rolling.
Yeah, so here we see my grandfather. He died, I think, in 1939 or 38, and his wife Miriam de Vries, and she passed away. She was very young and died from what is it?
Diabetes.
Diabetes, just months before insulin was invented. It's not quite horizontal.
Bob, don't worry about it. You can fix that.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, we're rolling.
Right, so here you see my uncle Jacob Machiel, who called boy in common times, and his wife Blanche Levy. He died in Auschwitz, and Blanche in Sobibor.
They lived also in Vera, and where my father was born. And he had informed my grandfather of a medical appointment opening in Vera, and that's how my grandfather, after graduating from med school in Amsterdam, ended up in Vera.
Rolling. So you can. What is this a photo of? Does he want to describe?
The what?
Can you
Describe it.
describe?
Oh, sorry. This is a monument of naming Jews who lived in Walcheren, like we did in Veere, and the same was with my aunt and uncle. They also lived in Veere.
Well, yes. This monument is in Middelburg, which is the capital of the province of Zeeland, where Zeeland, where Veere is located, and it is a monument at the Jewish cemetery there, and this is where my dad and I also visited. And if you, I'll stop there. Sorry. Now, if you zoom in,
I'm rolling.
that's when they immigrated to Israel.
Okay. Who is this?
These are my parents. I think that's when they lived in Israel.
They had immigrated there in 1951.
Something like it.
And I'm rolling.
Okay. So this is me with Leah, my wife, and my 3 children.
Names?
So Max is the oldest. Then comes Rosalind on my left arm, but it's right in the picture. And there is Debbie held by Leah. Ik denk het ook. I think it's my engagement party.
Okay, and we're rolling.
Well, it looks like my engagement party. My on the bottom, you see in the corner is Rachel, Leah's younger sister. Then comes my sister Miriam and my niece Clary
De Groot.
de Groot. Yeah, Clary de Groot. And as far as the adults are concerned, but behind Rachel is my father-in-law. Next to him with the black dress is my mother-in-law. Then is myself and Leah, my father and my mother.
And I'm rolling.
Yeah. This is a picture with Queen, may have been then princess, but Queen Beatrix. Yeah, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. Then comes with the white hair is a minister in one of the main churches. Then comes Rabbi Peller, and then that's me, myself there.
And what did you get?
No, that was not the moment of the
Just a picture.
just a picture. Yeah.
Okay.
She was visiting Curacao and had a party. Certain people were invented, or I was also as president of the synagogue, of the congregation.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you see there my father. The sun is shining on his head. Then the baby is my eldest granddaughter, Stacy, held by my mother.
And this was taken in Curacao when my grandparents were visiting there. They would do that every couple of years or so. And this was my daughter, Stacy, and this is Max speaking.
And I'm rolling.
Yeah. The building in the center is the part to see. You can see it has a little bit the look of a castle. It was all empty, nothing in it. People had to sleep on the floor with on some straw.
This was in France, in Conflans area,
You know, in the
the Sac area.
mhm.
Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. In 1990, 50 years after having left Veere, Leah and I went to visit, and we saw the doctor who was then the doctor of the place, and he had found some empty bottles somewhere in the cellar or whatever, and he gave me a few, let's call it for sentimental reasons, because my father had a little pharmacy right in his office.
Yeah, so my father got the two bottles, the two larger bottles, and the bottle on the left. By the way, if you were to read the label, it basically says Dr. M. Taytelbaum, that he's a medical doctor, an arts, and it has a telephone number on there, number 7. I assume the governor was number 1, and the fire department maybe number 2, police number 3, who knows. But anyway, 1 digit, telephone number 7. And I happened to get that bottle because my sister Debbie at one point had decided to go down to Vera and knock on the door of where my grandparents lived. And it was still the doctor's house, and Dr. Osterhoff answered. And basically, she explained that she's a Taytelbaum, and established a relationship, and that relationship went on where my father and mother, like my dad just described, met with them in 1990, and I met Dr. Osterhoff with my daughter Stacy, who after she had graduated high school. And I actually visited the house with Dr. Osterhoff and Stacy and his wife. And I actually stayed in my father's bedroom. We overnighted, and he brought down from his basement, this little bottle and I've cherished it very much as a result of, being part of the apothecary that my grandfather had. In those days, you mixed your medicines. It wasn't like all the pills like we can take today. Okay, this nameplate written in Hebrew says Dr. M. Taytelbaum, doctor being abbreviated. It belonged to my grandfather when he was practicing medicine in the Haifa area in Israel. And then when he moved to Jerusalem upon retirement, he had this also placed on his apartment door. And after he passed, since I have a PhD and my name is also there, Max Taytelbaum, I was able to get this plaque and just put it on wood as my name on a desk, and I've used it for years at work in remembrance of my grandfather.